Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the numbers behind, well, one of the fastest growing nations on the entire planet. We're talking about a country whose population boom is literally redrawing the world's demographic map.
All right, to kick things off, let's start with a question. Think about this. By the year 2050, so not that far off, one single African nation is on track to have more people than the United States. Yeah, you heard that right. It's set to become the third biggest country in the world by population. Any ideas which one it could be? If you guessed Nigeria, you're spot on. We're talking about a West African powerhouse that's in the middle of one of the most mind-blowing population explosions we've seen in modern history. This isn't just reshaping Nigeria's future, it's changing the game for the whole continent.
So, to really get a handle on what's happening in Nigeria today, we've got to rewind the clock just a little bit. For a long time, it was a key part of the British Empire. But everything changed on October 1st, 1960, when it gained independence. That moment, that was the starting pistol for a whole new chapter and a completely different demographic story.
All right, let's get into the numbers. Because honestly, when you hear the phrase population boom, it doesn't even begin to cover what's been happening here. The scale is it's almost hard to wrap your head around. So let's try to visualize just how staggering this growth really is.
Okay, just look at this. Back in 1950, Nigeria had less than 40 million people. Today, it's shot past 218 million. Let that sink in. That is more than a 5 times increase in a single human lifetime, and it's not slowing down. The forecast for 2050 has it becoming a true global demographic superpower.
And this chart really drives the point home, right? You can see it visually. That tiny bar for 1950, then this enormous jump to where we are today, and then look at the projection for 2050, almost 375 million people. It's not a gradual slope, it's a cliff, a steep, relentless climb.
But you know, this kind of explosive growth doesn't happen in a vacuum. It brings huge challenges. And this right here, this is a serious reality check. The average person in Nigeria can expect to live to be about 54 years old. Now, compare that to a developed nation where it's more like 82. That massive gap tells you everything you need to know about the incredible pressure on things like hospitals, clean water, all the basic resources when a country is growing this quickly.
Okay, so the big question is why? What's the engine behind this incredible growth? And, as you might guess, it's not just one thing. It's a really complex mix of social factors, economic realities, and some super powerful cultural traditions that all combine to keep the birth rate sky high.
You know, geographers actually have a name for this phase. It's called the demographic transition model. And Nigeria is the perfect textbook example of a country in what they call stage 2. It's pretty simple, really. You get better healthcare and sanitation, so fewer people are dying, especially young. The death rate drops. But, and this is the key part, the birth rate stays really high. And that gap between falling deaths and high births, boom, population explosion.
And here's a look at the real-world, on-the-ground reasons why that birth rate hasn't dropped. Think about it. If infant mortality is high, you might have more kids just to make sure some survive to adulthood. If there's no state pension to rely on when you're old, your children become your safety net. And then you layer on top of that really strong cultural and religious beliefs that favor large families, and yeah, you've got the perfect storm for this kind of growth.
Okay, so we've looked at the big numbers, the charts, the models, but what does this actually feel like for millions of people living it every day? Let's take these abstract ideas and see how they play out on the ground. And there's no better place to see this pressure cooker in action than in Nigeria's megacities.
We're heading into Lagos. It's the economic heart of the country and the biggest city in all of Africa. I mean, it is a bustling, heaving metropolis that acts like a giant magnet, pulling in people from all over who are searching for a better life. But when you cram over 15 million people into one place, you can literally see the infrastructure, the roads, the housing, the power grid, creaking and groaning under the immense strain.
And this gets to a really crucial point. You might think, well, just introduce modern family planning, right? But it's so much more complicated than that. Deeply rooted cultural norms often play a much bigger role. This quote just nails it. It shows how in many families, the decision about how many children to have isn't something a woman decides on her own.
Listen to this. Right now, the kids are more than the adults. That's from a community leader, and it perfectly describes what experts call the youthful bulge. Just imagine almost half of the entire population of Nigeria is under 15 years old. That puts an unbelievable amount of pressure on the system.
You have to build enough schools, enough hospitals, and then, in a few years, you have to have enough jobs for all of them.
So when you're facing challenges on this scale, what do? How does a government even begin to respond? Well, Nigeria's approach to this has actually changed a lot over the years. It's a really fascinating and super important story of a policy shift.
So how do you even try to manage growth like this? Well, their first shot at it back in 1988 was pretty blunt. They tried to tell women they could only have 4 children. As you can imagine, that did not go over well. It ran into a brick wall of cultural resistance. So fast forward to today, and the strategy is completely different. It's way more sophisticated. Now the focus is on something called the demographic dividend. The big idea is that this giant young population isn't a problem, it's a potential asset, a huge economic engine waiting to be started. And the key to turning that engine on, it's all about empowering women, specifically by educating girls. The evidence on this is overwhelming. When girls get an education, they tend to get married later, they have fewer kids, those kids are healthier, and they themselves become major contributors to the economy.
And all of this leads us to the ultimate question, the one everything hinges on. Is this massive wave of young people in Nigeria a ticking time bomb that's going to strain every resource to the breaking point, or could it be the complete opposite? If this generation is properly educated, empowered, and given opportunities, could this youthful surge become the country's single greatest asset, the very thing that powers its economy for the next century? Honestly, the answer to that question isn't just going to define Nigeria's future, it could shape the story of our world.